So my name's Kristen Boldt. I am a, kind of former attorney, mediator and consultant in Des Moines, Iowa. And my focus is on what I do in my business is to focus on communication coaching, team building, kind of a relational advisor. What I learned as a mediator over many years, because I kept having this feeling that if I could just get to people sooner, if I could help them understand each other better, reach that understanding, find a different way of communicating, they wouldn't have ended up in my office as a mediator. So that's why I've shifted to more the consulting role. One of the things that I use in my work is the spherical model. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today is kind of spherical thinking and how that can really change how we see the world, how we change our work as professionals and how that can impact us. So I have my little prop and I have to be a little bit, my background, it'll interfere a little bit. But when you think about a sphere, think about all of these nodes on here. All of these nodes are our needs, our connections, our relationships. And when everything in our life is working well, all those needs are being fulfilled, we are well-rounded. And we can adapt, we can expand, we can contract, we can respond to the world without losing our integrity. So I'm going to switch to the PowerPoint now, but I wanted to just share this initially to kind of put this picture in your head. So let me get my... Come on, there we go. So I'll talk a lot today about kind of the box versus the ball. Really the box versus the sphere, but I like alliteration. So when you think about a box, you guys may be able to see me on the sides. Yeah. Think about this box. It is rigid. It has sharp corners. It has a lot of weak parts on it. When I'm in a box, I can't see out of it. So I'm down in there. I can't see over it. It gives me very limited restrictions. This is where I stay. This is the part of me that these are my rules. These are my boundaries. It's very restrictive. And a lot of our systems are very boxy. Our legal system is very boxy. It is based on this kind of command and control model. So if I get you in the box, and if you just stay in your box, then you'll be controlled. You'll do what I need you to do. If you go back historically, there's a story about Henry Ford, and when he looked out, he had a window that he could look down upon his manufacturing floor, and he literally put boxes on the floor where you stand here and you put this piece on the other piece, and that's all you do. That is all that you are. You are a widget in the machine. So it's a very mechanical mindset. And when we look at our organizations, our systems, everyone just follows the rule and everyone does their little piece of the widget on the bigger widget in the machine and everything will be okay. But that's not how humans are. And that's not how we work. You know, if we look at, you take the Henry Ford boxes, when you put it into an organizational model, literally there are boxes on an org chart. They've just taken that and they've expanded it into that larger organizational model. So get into your box, stay here. Everyone just does their piece that's not really connected to anything else. Everything just filters up to the top, where there's one big box that kind of tells the other boxes what to do. It's a very limited thinking. It gives us a very restricted point of view, a very mechanical mindset. So it restricts our ability to do a lot of creative thinking because I can't get outside my box. And it makes it harder to trust other people because I can't necessarily see them. They're in their box and I'm in my box. And I don't want you to hurt my box. So I'm going to build things up. So I'm just going to lob things at you from my box, lob things at me from your box. But we don't see how we're all really connected. So the other option we have, when you get out of that box, is to be in more of a sphere. The sphere is the strongest shape in nature. So it has no weak points. It can expand, it can contract, it can change shape without losing its integrity. It is more holistic. If I'm on any point of the sphere, as I saw my little Hoberman, from any one of these points, I can see all of the other points on the sphere. I can see everything. I always have a holistic view. I'm not limited. I'm not stuck in my little box. It allows us to see that we are all interconnected. We are all interdependent. There's a wonderful word I've learned doing this, which is tensegrity. And tensegrity is that balance. Tensegrity in art, they'll create structures that are held together with tension cables. So rather than stacking pieces on top of each other, building them, one on top of each other, they use tension cables and they balance them in such a way that it looks like it's floating. And so that's what I do. That's what I see my work with people, is bringing those personalities and the needs into harmony so that everyone has what they need, but no one is taking away from anyone else. So that's kind of that being able to build that harmony, put things into that balance is tensegrity. These systems are self-organizing. So like they say, water finds its own level. When you have a healthy system, when you have healthy people in a healthy system, it's going to naturally find that rounded shape. We are always in the sphere. So even when we don't really break out of the box sort of falls away to allow us to see that we were in the sphere all the time. And when I say that, I mean we're all independent, we are all autonomous beings, and we are all interconnected with everybody else. So what we do impacts those around us. I talk about this a lot when I do divorce mediations, because as you know, divorce can make people angry. The legal system oftentimes or traditionally encourages that fighting, that us and them mentality. But whatever you do to each other, you're also doing to your kids. It's not just about them. Yeah, you can have this big fight and you try to get your so-called win. But a year from now, when you're sitting at the ball game, or 10 years from now, when you're at your kid's wedding, you're going to be dragging around that baggage with you. So that when you got was also had consequences for you. And so that's what I mean when I say we're all interconnected. We can't, when we hurt someone else, it's also hurting us. And that's something that our legal system traditionally has kind of missed out on. It has this very mechanical view and this very us-them view that there's just the two sides, you have to pick one, and that's it. There's no interconnection between that. My years as a mediator and a collaborative professional have shown me differently. We're all interconnected. We're all related. There's always a relation beyond what that disagreement is. And so when we look at the sphere, we get to see that interconnected relationship. We understand how our needs need to be fulfilled. We understand other person's needs. We understand how they all interact together. Everything is a part of the sphere. Nothing is a part. Everything is a part. Nothing is a part. So we want to be able to see that whole system, see relationships and the relationship dynamics that are the patterns of interactions and the relationships within there. So if we're going to change, what does it mean to change from the box to a sphere? We're going to change how we see the world. We're going to remove the blinders that the box puts on this. As we take down those walls, and we're going to see those connections that were always there. We're not that far apart from each other as we are led to believe. And so what we're going to talk about today is, what does it look like to be in a spherical system, to view that world spherically, to intuitively start seeing those patterns and connections that are there so that you can round out the whole sphere and not be limited to just your one little box. As a lawyer, and this is why I don't like being a lawyer, why I left that behind, you have to pick a side, and picking a side puts you in a box. And I've always intuitively seen beyond that. And so that that one-sided representation just always made me crazy. So we are spheres within spheres. It starts with our personal sphere, who we are. In conscious contracts, we talk about an operating manual of me. I've started talking about that as the personal sphere. Our personal sphere connects to our communal sphere, our communities, our families, our work, our church, our organizations, our hobbies, things like that, our community around us, the larger organizations, our societal spheres, because we're not in this world alone. The people that you love the most and the people that drive you nutty are all part of this larger societal sphere that we're in. And then that global sphere that takes us around the world. When we start seeing systems from the inside out, it means starting with the personal sphere and connecting all the way out to that global sphere. Everything is a sphere. It's just a system within a system. So in order to start making this transformation, there's some letting go that has to happen. We have to let go of the box that we've been put in. All of us kind of get put in a box. As we're growing up, there are expectations put on us. These are the norms. These are the things you should do. This is the box we need you to fulfill. And we've got to let go of some of that because there's a whole lot more possibility out there. I love there's a phrase that a butterfly can only fly because they forgot they were a caterpillar. So that's why we have this imagery that caterpillar self has to allow the transformation to take place so that you can get to the other side. Yeah, the butterfly only flies because it forgets it was once a caterpillar. So we have to look at what our self-limiting paradigms are. What are the things that are holding us back? What are the old mindsets, the outdated thinking, these norms that we have been given because it fits well into a box? It may be time to say, let's think about this a little bit differently. I think this is a unique time to start asking these questions after COVID. COVID turned the world upside down. And a lot of things that we said, we have to do this. This is the way it has to be. You have to be in an office every day. You can't work from home. You have to be there 9 to 5. A lot of the norms that we had. You can't have a meeting on the computer. We've got to fly across the country and be there in person. All of those norms, we can't possibly do it another way. And then the world said, we're going to send you a pandemic and you're all going to be in your homes for months on end. And then all of a sudden, necessity being the mother of invention, we found some new ways to do things. And so now in this next phase, because we never bounce back, we always bounce forward because there's always new elements of life and our situation. Now it's kind of it's a good time to start introducing new ideas. And new concepts, because we're not in the old. We're out of that COVID crisis thing. And now we're in this kind of liminal space where we're trying to figure out what our next phase of normal is going to be. So this is the time to come out of that cocoon and start looking for some new ways to fly. So when you are in a spherical system, excuse me. Okay. A spherical system allows us to go far. Flexible, adaptable, resilient, responsive, and resourceful. These are the characteristics that allow us to be responsive in life. I use this phrase a lot when I explain conscious contracts to people, and some of you may be familiar with that. Very briefly, this is an integrative group, so I'm guessing you know what I'm talking about, but just in case, a conscious contract is relational. And the two elements, the two core elements in there are a touchstone that says our values, our vision, our mission, who we are, and the big audacious good we want to do in the world. And an ACD, a process to address change and engage disagreement. So essentially a communication plan, and eventually a conflict resolution plan, but it's who we are and how we're going to be. And we design those contracts to be relational, to help people be dynamic and evolving and know how we're going to talk to each other. So the security, instead of coming from a boxy old contract that locks you in and says who's going to sue who when something goes wrong, or who's going to pay who, or whatever it is, we create this dynamic, living, evolving document that can respond and adapt with the relationship, with the change that life is eventually going to throw at you, at all of us, because life is always changing, people are always changing, the world is always changing. So we want a system, and we want agreements that are flexible and adaptable with that. So our security comes from not being locked in, but by being adaptable and being responsive and being resilient, because we have that trust, we have that understanding, so that we can respond to whatever comes our way and maintain that well-rounded shape that allows us to do what we need to do and work at our best capacity. So starting to get to that place that we're working well together, we have to start with ourselves. A spherical system isn't based on control. We don't really have control. You reach a certain age in life and the world will usually show you that. You don't have the control you think. At 52, I've learned that many, many times. We do have influence. We can influence our shape. We can influence the shape of those that we're involved with, or whether it's work or personal life. So because we don't have control, and we're not going to worry about that, we're going to think about our influence. And so it is essential to think about how we show up, because that's the influence and the energy we're going to take into our interactions, into our organizations. So we start with how I see myself. That personal sphere starts with looking at the patterns in our own lives. How do I see myself? How do others see me? How do I see the world? This is going to determine how we think and behave. And so if there's something that in our lives we don't like, we say there's kind of a dent in that part of our sphere, then we have to stop and look at that and do that deeper assessment of where do I need to be compared to where I am. For me, this last year, it was my legal practice became a dent because there was bigger work that I felt called to do, and that meant I had to let go. So I had to change how I see myself, because that lawyer becomes a definition. It's a big label that you hang on you. So I had to change how I see myself, accept how others see me differently, and change how I see the world and the potential good that I could do in it. So we are going to look at if we're developing our personal sphere. In conscious contracts, we call it the operating agreement of me, but I like the sphere better. What are my needs? What are the things that drive me? What are the values? What do I need to make sure that my sphere is rounded? I am working at my best, at my highest level. Everything, you know that feeling when you just feel alive and everything's clicking. That's when that energy is rounding out your sphere. So we assess what our needs are, what our drives are, what our values are, what our connections are, what are the things that are crucial in my life to help me work at the level I want to be at. How do I work? How do I communicate? How do I contribute? How do I respond? When we work with people in the conscious contracts, we ask them to kind of tell themselves, what is the stupid thing you do when you're really stressed? Because we all have it. And rather than hiding it, which you really can't, it's going to come out. It's better to say, yeah, this is what you're going to see when I'm really stressed, and this is how you can help me. And it allows us to be our authentic selves, which is a much better place to be. Because in the old, it's the box. Okay, listen, you're going to come to work for me. I need you to just do this thing. This is your box on the floor. When you take, let's see if I can do this on the screen. When you take a very well-rounded person and you try to put them, it lost me. Well, when you take a very well-rounded person, that big round sphere, and you try to put it in a box, it doesn't fit. And so what we end up doing is shaving off parts of our lovely, well-rounded person in order to make them fit in their box. So basically saying, yeah, I only need certain parts of you. The rest of it I don't really care about. And so you're getting less of that person. So what a spherical system allows you to do is to step up and be that authentic self that is who you really are, how you are really at your best, not just what someone else expects of you or needs of you. So you can see, I love this picture, that you can see all of the different ways that our spheres interconnect. It's our personal sphere, our family, our health, our community, education, organizations, teams. All of these things are their own sphere within themselves that we want to be well-rounded, but they also connect to everyone else, everything else on the sphere. So when you look at this, you can imagine if the family sphere had a big dent, or it had a big wedge in it or something, a big kind of push in, that's going to pull on the other sphere. So they're going to feel that sphere isn't at its best. So that's why you see when someone's going through a divorce or someone has a death in the family and they're showing up at work, they're not their best self. It's a weird story, but we lost a child when our first was stillborn, and my now ex-husband went to work and his boss got mad at him. What's the matter with you? You're just not working like you used to. What's the deal? And he knew that we had lost a child, but there was that expectation of, well, your pain, that death in your family is now impacting my worker. Well, yes, it is, because we're all human. And but because they were, and it was actually a manufacturing company, I just need you to do your widget. I need you to do your part on the assembly line. I don't want to deal with the rest of you. And it really impacted. They had a very high turnover rate because of this sort of attitude. So when you get into a spherical system and we start recognizing how we can take care of each other and help everyone stay rounded, that it does, giving someone some space or giving them extra support to help them get back to their rounded sphere is going to impact us much better than trying to stick them in a box. So
Kristen,
when you
have to read that story you just told about the employer. That is just outrageous and so predictable that some people would do that. But that's your home life. Now come back, right? If you need time off, take time off. Don't bring your shit to work. That is just maddening. I'm so sorry that the two of you went through that, and your whole family.
That was, and it's how they were. It was a husband and wife running this thing, but yeah, they were very much like that. And I hadn't thought about that story for a long time, but it's a great example of that. So when we start looking at a spherical system, if you're going to break it down and start to build and create one, we start with those nodes. Those are the key elements, the qualities, the characteristics in your sphere. So if I was looking at mine, there's the, health and job and family, but there's also a spiritual element, or that kind of sacred space of meditation. Am I taking care of myself? What do I need to round out? Because I need some of that reflective time as well. The connections are the links. Those are the critical links that are going to influence the energies in your sphere. So those are we taking care of our relationships? Are we isolating? Everyone got very isolated in COVID, I've noticed. And I had a little bit in COVID, and then I started the year falling on the ice and busting my ankle. And so I was stuck in my house for 2 months. I was very happy to be out and about again. But looking at what are the critical elements, the qualities we need in our life, and what are the connections that we need. Connections are so critical to provide the energy that we need in our sphere. And then evaluating what the current state of roundness, what shape are you in right now? And I'll have some examples of what this looks like coming up here. Evaluating what's the roundness. So it may look, if everything's going great, life is just zippity skippity great, then you're going to look very round. If there are some parts that aren't going well, then you're going to have some dents in that sphere. So once we determine what the current state is, then we start evaluating, what does roundness mean? What shape do we need to be in? What do we need? And then the action steps of what do we need to do to get to that shape? And it's going to be different for every person because every person's different. So it's very personal. It's not a cookie cutter. What does it mean for me to have my health where it needs to be, to have my finances where they need to be, to have my kids are now, when my kids were younger, what I needed was different. They're now, one of them just graduated college and started a new job. So the needs are very different. And then the continuum, there we go. Visualizing the relationship between our sphere and other spheres. There are 2 gentlemen that I learned this from, and I had a call with them the other day, and they said, they asked me how my sphere changed now that my daughter's graduated, has a job, is kind of launched into full adulting, as she says it. And it is very different. Our spheres are still connected. They'll always be connected, but how they interacted when she was at home or when she was at university, and how it is now that she's a young adult starting her career, that continuum shifts. And so keeping our family rounded is going to shift a little bit too. I have a habit of talking, losing my notes because I just started improvising there. So when you're going to start, this is kind of a close-up shot of what it looks like to have those nodes and connections. The nodes are your needs, the connections are there, and these are the elements. Nodes are the elements, the people, the projects, ideas, resources, activities that are going to influence the condition of the sphere. And the connections are your links between those influence factors. And so the sphere overall is going to be shaped by that dynamic relationship. So it is ever changing. The shape of my sphere is going to change day to day, and that's okay. As long as the overall shape is staying round, it's okay that it's going to change there. But this is kind of a close-up look. So when we start working through these with people, we'll start identifying where those needs are and those nodes are. So in the old system, the old goal is to hit the bullseye. We hit a goal, or not sure why I did that. Or if you're doing I've done some strategic planning this way with some groups. And in the old model, you would say, all right, in quarter 1, we're going to hit this goal. In quarter 2, we're going to hit this goal. In quarter 3, and what have you. Those generally tend to be kind of arbitrary. And when you limit yourself to hitting the bullseye, then you kind of put some blinders on yourself. I mean, it is a focus, which I guess is the plus side. But it also is very limiting because you're not going to see some of the other things come up because you're setting that bullseye at a certain point in time. in our planning session today, this is the bullseye we want to hit. But life is going to change. Life may not send us what we think it's going to send us. It may send us some different things, and that goal may need to be different, but we've set it, we've committed, and we have to stick to it. Can't just go tangenting off. And you can't. You don't want to keep changing bullseyes, because that would be very frustrating, because now you've committed to a path and now you're shifting to different paths, but you're still on one single path. So you don't see anything off to either side. When we're looking at a spherical system, the new goal is to be well-rounded. So instead of saying we want to hit this one kind of arbitrary point, we want everything in our system, whether it is our family, if it's our organization, we want everything in the organization to be working at its highest level, to be well-rounded, to have that dynamic energy. And if everything in your system is working the way it's supposed to be, if you are well-rounded, flexible, adaptable, resilient, resourceful, responsive, you're going to meet whatever those goals are, because you are empowering everybody to work as their highest selves. Your individual spheres are strong, which makes your team sphere strong, which makes your organizational sphere strong. And that's the difference between a system based on control that says, all right, I have to give you a bullseye because Lord knows what you'll do. I need to give you a point, and that's where you're going to drive to. When we're looking at a system that we influence, we're saying, all right, here are the things that are important. Here we have those nodes and connections, so we know we have that shared vision of what's important for the organization. We know what's important on an individual level for us to show up the way we need to show up, because that makes it easier in our team, makes it easier on the organization. But now when we're well-rounded, you may hit some of the same goals. You may find great new things. You may find innovations you have no idea were there. You are responsive because you've got a new opportunity that comes up that wasn't what you expected when you started planning 2 months ago. And now you have the ability to respond and adapt to it, because going that way is still going to keep your overall shape rounded. So it gets us into a more innovative space. I was saying before we started today, I love that Quinnipiac is become this playground for our innovative, integrative work. I won't say which one. We have a law school here, and just much more conservative. The legal system can sometimes be like, trying to turn a steamship. It's not always very fast to move. And so when you have something like this, you have a program like this, an organization like this, that invites innovation and change, you can stay very well-rounded and adapt and try new things and be much more responsive to the world and your environment and your consumers or students. So you can either look at, and when I work with organizations or so keep doing that. When I work with organizations, I have to use a 2D model because we don't have the 3D ones set up to use yet. But this is a little bit of what it looks like. So when I work with, I've done strategic planning using this model. And so we'll start with entering, what are the values? What are the needs? I did this with one organization, and my opening question for them was, what does a healthy, vibrant organization feel like? I didn't want numbers. I kind of wanted to start with some of the less quantifiable factors, traditionally quantifiable, because I wanted them to start to think differently. What does it feel like? What are the needs that you have? What are the things that need to be in place to garner those feelings? So if it is consumer experience or a smooth, behind the scenes operation, whatever it is. So we'll identify those, and those become your nodes on the circle. You can have as many as you want. There are 12 on here. It's just what fits on the screen. The next step is to start asking, okay, let's enter the values. Let's develop a question or a statement that allows us to assess whether or not we're really fulfilling that need. And so you'll enter those values. Those are the little red dots on there. So it can be, usually it's kind of a 1 to 5 scale. 1 being, yeah, we're not hitting that one at all. That's really off of there. And 5 being, yep, it's exactly where we want to be. And so when you connect those dots in the bottom corner there, you start to see a shape form. And what's even better, when you have in that last box, you have the current shape in the middle there. If someone said that's the shape of your organization, intuitively, how would you feel about that? Like, if that is not a good shape. That's not a great, that's kind of a amoeba, kind of a blob. The desired shape is that roundness. So what do we need to do to our current shape? And this one, depending on what node 2 was or node 6 was, or you could even start with a few of them to start rounding that out. What do we do to start pulling those dents back out and start rounding them? One of the things I like about this model is that it removes this sort of goofy, false competition that organizations can sometimes get into within themselves. So we're going to have this department compete against this department to reach this, or whatever the goal is. When you look at something like this, an organization, a spherical model, if I'm pulling on one end, if I'm pulling this out, I'm going to round out my stuff over here. If I pull too hard, it's going to dent the other end. So we can't round our sphere by denting someone else's. That goes back to the family example I gave earlier. Yeah, we have a lot of emotions, and those are valid, and there's a way those do need to be addressed, and they need to be handled, better handled with a therapist than a lawyer, pretty much across the board in most cases. Because when you want to stick it to your spouse, it's going to come back and bite you. And people don't always like when you point that out. One of the things we'll ask in collaborative cases is we'll ask parents, what story do you want your kids to tell about your divorce in 10 years? Is this something that it was rough, but the family got through it together, and now everyone gets along and we're fine? Everyone can show up to my soccer game, school concert, whatever it is, and I don't have to worry that some funky vibe or weird fight's going to break out? Or is this a scar that they're going to carry with them? And that's usually a pretty good reality check to get people, well, okay, maybe I don't want to do that. I don't want this to impact my kids that way. Because your kids have their own sphere. And so how I am as a parent, how healthy I am, is going to impact my kids' sphere, because we're connected, but they have their own. They don't reflect, they're not just part of mine. And so it's important, if I go too far to an unhealthy place, or I go too far, you can envision, 3 spheres of a family. I try to dent the other parent too much, the kid's going to feel that pull as well. So we are all independent, we are all autonomous, and we are all connected to each other. So this is a 3D version of this, the 3D rendering of the sphere. It's a well-rounded sphere is going to exhibit robust spherical integrity. So all the elements are well energized, they're working in harmony to the best degree possible. It's kind of cool to see the shape. I haven't figured out how to reproduce it when I work with clients. That tech, I'm sure, is coming. But in that 3D view, values are plotted on the X, Y, and Z axes, and creating that spatial orientation that really shows the interrelationships between the influence factors. And you can really see in that right image where those dents are. And you can see the health of the system. You see where you need to do a little more work. You see what things are doing well. It's a great integrated visual to share with people. And this resulting shape corresponds to the areas of progress or the deficiencies, the indentations, show where we need a little bit more attention or more improvement. So when we look at the spherical system as a tool for collaboration, one of the things it lets us do is get rid of that same page metaphor. Very often people will come in, say, all right, well, we just need to get everybody on the same page. Usually the person saying that means you need to get on my page. Very rarely is there a pre-designed one page that everyone needs to get on. There's a great story in, I don't like the name of this. The name of this book is Collaborating with the Enemy. I don't like the name because I don't think it fits the book, but I'm not an editor. But he tells a wonderful story in there about this complex collaboration in a hospital. And the CEO and her team said, all right, they designed their one page and then sent out their people to do it, to implement it. What they ended up finding, because it was the one page that suited the needs of those in the top of that, in that top box, type of that hierarchy, it actually created a much harder work environment for those that were in the trenches doing the work day to day. They hadn't taken them into account. They actually were making their lives harder because they didn't have the same page. The same page didn't work for them. And this new plan ended up failing. They had to redo it. And so he uses that as an analogy for complex collaborations. When you get into a collaboration sphere, we're going to lose the one page and look at what we can co-create together. So we need to start with seeking that understanding. What are my needs? What are your needs? What are any of the stakeholders coming together to understand the full picture of what we're working with? And then understanding those needs, understanding all of the different smaller individual spheres that are coming together, then we look at how do we create a sphere that helps all of us. So what are those needs on an organizational level, the collaboration level? What are the essentials we have to have? What are the things we absolutely can't have? And how are we going to balance that out? How are we going to communicate when we start pulling to one side or the other? How do we have that communication? This is where, again, I'll mention conscious contracts work so beautifully because we are creating space to co-create together our values, our vision, our needs, our goal of the great audacious good we're going to do in the world. And we're going to look at what are the needs of all the people involved. What are our essentials? What are the things we can't have? And where is there space in between to let people be themselves and to have some flexibility? Because if we know what our essentials are, we know those are being met, then you can let some of the other stuff ride and let it be a little bit more relaxed and casual. So we're going to foster those nodes of safety and trust because we know with this deep level of understanding that whatever comes at us, we know we have a process to work on it together. We know we have a goal of keeping that sphere rounded. So something happens and we can't hit that arbitrary bullseye we designed because, say, the world shuts down for 2 years. But we know we can still find another way to stay rounded because that's the goal. And it can adapt, that roundness goal can adapt to specific ends, means to an end. But that gets back to the going far, being flexible, adaptable, responsive. So we look at what shape do we want to be? How do our shapes overlay with each other? It's important to understand your team, to understand the people that you're working with. I did a talk recently for a foundation here that works with nonprofits. And I talked to them, well, they asked me to talk on crucial conversations. That's not exactly what I talked about. What I talked about, I said the crucial conversations are the ones you have every day. And it's how you design your systems and your communication procedures and your understanding. That's what's going to let you deal with the big things when they happen. But one of the questions was couple people, well, we have this one person. Okay, tell me about your one person. And this one person wasn't fitting in to the proper box. They didn't say it that way, but that's what was happening. So the one that sticks in my mind is they had an introvert in an office full of extroverts. They had about, 15 people in this office. Most of them had been there quite a while. They were all extroverts. They loved to get in a room, just not duke it out, but debate and throw things out there and just they love the energy of that back and forth and that, lovely marketplace of ideas. And really getting in there and going through everything, and they'd find a solution. Well, now they have someone who's introverted. An introvert going into that kind of environment is going to feel like sensory overload. It's going to be incredibly intimidating. But this is someone that they valued, someone who has a lot of talents, who's a great member of the team. So how do you adapt the system to be able to fit someone, whether to allow everyone to contribute, whether they are introverted, extroverted, whatever their thing is, rather than saying, you've got to fit into our box. So that's what we're going to do. How do the shapes overlay? Are we letting one side pull or dent the other? What are the values that we share? What are the things that we have in common? When I was working with this group, it's a nonprofit. So no one's in here to get rich. They're there to do good in the world. And they share that same value. They share that same vision. How do we co-create together? Not one over the other, but everyone coming together and adding their piece that's going to help make this sphere rounder and bigger and fuller and more successful. And then having a success metric. You need to be able to assess to see where you are and see where we need to shift our actions to influence the shape when dents do come up. So it's not, I talked about, I wanted, not all of our nodes are going to be things that are traditionally quantifiable. There are some that are, creativity, acceptance, innovation. Well, how do you know what those things are? Some of those are an environment. It's a feeling. It's the culture of the organization rather than something I can stick a number on. But you need those numbers as well. You need both in those, and the sphere has room for all of those things to come together. So how do we foster and maintain that healthy shape? We need to step back and really take that global view. We're going to co-create the process together. We're going to pull together and look at the needs of all of the stakeholders, not with how do I get them in my box or on my page, but just coming in and seeking understanding. Because if you can open your mind and go in with that curiosity mindset, you will learn so much more than if you try to go in and make them fit kind of this preformed design. So we want to hear the needs of all of our stakeholders and understand them for what they truly are. Replacing an adversarial model with a spherical model. We can't round anything by trading dents. There's I just lost the author's name. The Realm of Possibility, Xander. And he talks about the realm of possibility or the downward spiral. And in the image, in the downward spiral, even if winning and losing are your only options, and even if you win, the only place to go is back down. It's like being in an elevator. You're not getting out beyond that. When you take that out, the realm of possibility is spherical. It can always expand. There are always new possibilities because we've expanded our vision. We've changed how we see ourselves, changed how we see others, changed how we see the world. And you get out of that either or mentality and replace it with a yes and. So that we're always expanding and adapting and responding. We're going to address the shape of the whole system and not just one piece. We understand that I can't round my sphere by denting yours. So we have to look at the shape of the whole system. And we're striving for spherical integrity, for well-roundedness, because that's going to let us have that adaptability. We co-create and share the vision. It's not a competition. There is so much more possibility when we come together and open ourselves up to creating the new. Sharing understanding and values and making that mental shift from conflict to creativity. Conflict, when I do trainings, I talk about conflict's a canary in the coal mine. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It says what we've always done, there's been a change in the person, in the environment, in something in our world, that what we've always done is no longer working. So it needs to be addressed and adjusted and to meet the new needs, and so that we can go forward and have it working again. This is one of the things that we can really make a change in our legal system, because the legal system tends to look backwards and say, okay, well, that thing broke. Who's to blame? How much will it cost them? All of that. And once you get that verdict, the thing is still broken. We have not fixed anything. It's still busted because we're just looking backwards. Instead of saying, this thing broke, how do we do better? How do we, it may be something that there's some repair possible, but if you don't want the thing to break again, then there needs to be some innovation and something new. So most people I find as a mediator, as a collaborative professional, they want to do better. They want to be able to move forward. We're always bouncing forward. We don't ever bounce back because there's no time machine. We're not going backwards in time. We always move forward. And so how can we help people? How can we, as integrative professionals, spherical thinkers, say, okay, let's help client. Let's help you see the larger picture, help you identify what your needs are and some creative ways that we can meet them, instead of just saying this is old style of win or lose. And that's why I think court a lot of times is unsatisfying, because you haven't really undone what was done in the past. You can't unring a bell. And so we need to start shifting to solutions that help keep moving us forward and help us evolve and respond to the new changes in the world. So in our old systems, they're pretty boxy, and the box tells us to fit in, tells us to be who we are expected to be, to do what the system demands of us. Just play your part, install your widget, and keep your mouth shut. Oftentimes, be who you're expected to be. Be who someone else needs you to be. But the sphere lets us be who we are meant to be, to contribute, to understand and contribute the best of ourselves, to open ourselves to the possibilities we may not have imagined before, and to provide what others in the world need us to be. I believe firmly that we all have a purpose. I believe in kind of this original grace. We're all here with a good to do in the world. And not everyone finds that. We're not really encouraged to find it. And I have a wonderful faith in humanity and a vision of what we can be when we encourage people to be their full authentic self, to lead from their heart, to support each other, and to use this lovely creativity, creative minds and hearts to create this big, audacious good in the world. And the sphere lets us do it. That's what I love about this, is that's how my brain works. Because I've always seen all of these sides of everything and how everything works together and interconnected, and how can we make that work? And if you are when you're in that flow, when you're in that well-working sphere, you know what that feels like if you've had that experience. It's energizing, and you feel the possibility. So that's what spherical thinking lets us do. So I think we still just have our 4 people, but I would love any questions, and my information is on here. If you have almost made it through without coughing again. If you have any questions, if you would like to know more, please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you about this. The website's on there. The gentleman that created this kind of spherical model and spherical thinking that I work with would love to work with others. We can, if there's interest, we can set up a call with them and learn some more about this if you are curious. So, any questions from the few that we have here?
I don't have a question, but I do have some observations, and I'm really excited by so much of what you said, and I appreciate the work that you're doing and that the center is doing. I'm an attorney, but I haven't practiced law in decades, and I've been following my passion for dance, and I'm a professional dancer. So and what I talk a lot about when I'm teaching and performing is about cultivating resilience and adaptability and flexibility, because we obviously need that all the time. And I think one reason I stepped away from the law is because it was my experience was it was too rigid for me, and I was looking to be cultivating something different. But a lot of your comments also helped me, as did the introductory session with Kim Wright the other day, understand what I was doing when I was practicing law, even though I felt like a misfit and a failure. I worked primarily as an adjudicator, as a hearing officer, and on a board that heard decisions. And I realize now that what I was trying to do was heal people, the relationships. So the highly adversarial relationships in special education cases, for instance, in which parents understandably were frustrated or wanted the best for their kids, but would be adjudicating for years with the Board of Education, and everyone wanted to get to the same place. So I realize now that I was kind of doing mediation, and I believe in it. I believe that so we need connection. I hope the background noise isn't too much. I'm sitting outside.
No, you're good.
But so I have no idea of how I'm going to apply what I've heard today and the other day. And it's like, it's all related. And I'm thrilled to hear that there is a greater approach using the law for healing, because the rigidity and the superimposition of the structure versus having us all have tools and moving forward together, that system works sometimes, but as you've indicated, and as Kim Wright was talking about the other day, there's so many times when it doesn't work and exacerbates the problem. So I applaud what you're doing, and Carrie, what you're doing at the center. In the back of my mind is this possibility that maybe I would do a mediation training, but I don't know. I love being in that dance studio, so I don't know. But thank you very much. I'm going to have to keep processing.
Chloe, I think mediation is a dance. And in fact, I would encourage you to just think about trying it to see if you can imagine just another way to dance, because in my view, it is way harder, but also more beautiful and creative and artistic than any typical litigation. And I've litigated for quite a while, and there's a time and a place for litigation, but that's for the rule followers who really need the hierarchical person to say what's going on. What's beautiful about mediation is you're never going to decide the case. I've sometimes used the word orchestrating, but even that is too directive in my view. But it is definitely done right, in my opinion. It is facilitating the parties to examine. I'd never thought about the spherical imagery per se, and use the language that you just did, Kristen, but you may find yourself really drawn to it. If that's not to say that there's anything wrong with just staying in the dance world, but if you're drawn to thinking about, well, now the legal profession may be ready for people like me. You were a groundbreaker, whether you saw yourself or that way or not. But I wanted to respond to that comment, but also just to say how cool that you're also a dancer. I want to just say to you, Kristen, I kind of thought I knew exactly what this was, but it was way beyond what I thought it was or thought it to be, in that the imagery my brain just kept exploding with ideas, from I got to send this video to so-and-so to, oh my goodness, what if we could do this? I totally understand how you use this in family law, and I can only imagine that collaborative lawyers and family mediators are just hungry for this. And we've been trying to teach this interconnectedness approach without this language. So I'm absolutely going to be talking about bringing this as just another, not just, but another really helpful approach to the kind of family law we're trying to teach at Quinnipiac, which is very healing. In fact, there's an article that I've never finished called Family Lawyers as Agents of Healing and Reason. Mm-hmm. Now I'm not so fond of the reason part, but child-focused, child-centered. So that's an obvious one, but in the way you've talked about contracts, I guess one of my questions is, where else, you've talked about several contexts, but I'm having trouble imagining a context where this wouldn't be helpful, right? Because we're all groups of people trying to work.
Yeah, everything is a sphere. So when you understand that, it's all part of it. One of the things I'll say on the mediation training, and I'm designing one now, and I want to do it in modules, because I want the early ones to just be, how do we communicate? How do we listen and understand each other differently? Because I want it open to everybody, not just people that want to be mediators, but it's just communication's a life skill, and we don't teach it. And we teach all these lovely skills to mediators and lawyers, but that makes us gatekeepers. That's why I want to work with organization in your work life, in your home life. If I can teach you to communicate differently, to hear differently, to understand where conflict comes from, that, our defense mechanisms are just smacking into each other and we need to take a step back. I tell a story when I teach. I had a couple that came to me for a divorce. And this was before I knew conscious contracts, but that's what I ended up writing for them. But I talked to them and I said, I don't think you guys want to get divorced. I think you would like to stop having the same fight. And I said, if you want, we can talk about that. And then if we don't figure it out, of course, it's not going anywhere. But we ended up doing this deep dive and this seeking understanding. And One was a fighter and one was a flighter. And so they had very different conflict styles based on their families of origin. So his family never dealt with anything. So he wanted to deal with everything right when it happened, because he was fearful if it didn't, it would go away. It would never get dealt with. She didn't want to put her foot in her mouth. She needed time to get her thoughts together. So we literally wrote a script and said, okay, when you get into this, she would say, okay, I hear you. I'm going to take a shower, walk the dog, whatever it is, and I'll check back in. And then she'd check back in and either be ready to talk or not. And he would give her the space until she was ready. They ended up staying married. I mean, it was really cool, but it was just, we just rewrote how they communicated. And if I can do that with people way before you get to that point, that's a ripple effect. I want to be the pebble in the pond. And this allows to do that. So when you're looking at mediation trainings, some are very, I don't want to say red-a-judge, but they're a little red-a-judge. A little palliative, and it's kind of well, I can tell you by my 30 years of court, whatever. Yeah, it's a red-a-judge. That's not what it is. And there's others that are more transformative, that really get into helping people understand each other and helping them communicate. My undergrad's in communications. That's my bachelor's is in. How do we really communicate? And really facilitative of helping people communicate better, so that then you're facilitating and helping them find their solution. And now you've taught them a new skill. Because the next time something comes up, they're going to have that.
Do you have a background at all in psychotherapy, or because a lot of the language is similar to that?
Not exactly, but I went to Vanderbilt, and the communications major down there is interdisciplinary. So it was psychology, sociology, linguistics. It was the study of how humans communicate. So there was a lot of that as part of it. So sort of. And then the ongoing trainings I go to, that's what I get pulled to. I want to understand people. Mm-hmm. And I want to help them. The analogy I used when I was starting out is I think there was a quote of Michelangelo that he said, he would just see the statue in the marble and his job was just to bring it out. And that's what you have, the solutions. We have our solutions. We know what we need. My job is to help you find the words and bring it out and find a different way of interacting.
So I'm curious about how much resistance you run into, because I think what you're talking about, and I love it. And I feel like I actually practice a lot of it. But I think it requires people to be vulnerable, and that's, and we know that people aren't comfortable with that very often. Although I love that Brene Brown quote about it being the birthplace of creativity and innovation and change. But do you run into a lot of resistance?
I've found that I do more and more mediations without attorneys present. People will come. And so it's a little bit, the people that are finding me want what I do. Mm-hmm. So those are the people I see, but they're coming before anything's filed. We need to figure stuff out, but we don't want to kill each other, but we need help. Okay, well, let's figure that out. And there's usually such relief that this is possible. You don't have to fight about every darn thing. And that the court will
you wouldn't get resistance from collaborative lawyers, right? Or do you?
No, collaborative lawyers are great. And collaborative lawyers are different. So,
you're speaking our language, right?
Right. And I'm shifting now to being the facilitator. I can't be a coach because I'm not a mental health professional, but to be a facilitator on the collaborative team. So I'm there to help facilitate around the sphere and let the lawyers, and when I do those collaborative trainings, lawyers are advisors and guides, but you're not advocates. And in that harsh traditional term, you're there to advise and guide. But I always liked when I was doing that as the lawyer, when we get to the point in the case where the clients talk more than the professionals in the room. That's what you want. Give them that voice. And then they're going to be able to do that when you're not in the room. So that's the real gift we give them.
I would like to jump in if that's okay. I found your presentation extremely intuitive. It's funny, I'd have a question in my brain and then the next slide addressed that exact question. So I appreciated that. A thought I had though is the justice system itself, I feel like is very much in a box. You're right. It's always looking backwards. Who broke it? Who's to blame? What are we going to do about it? And I think that's the problem with looking at precedent, because you can't really effectuate change if you're doing things the way that it's always been done in the past. And it made me think of a time I worked at the court for 7 years, and my judge and my mentor, I adore him like crazy. Oftentimes when we were getting ready for a jury trial for a divorce, he would look at the parents, because it was usually because of custody. He'd look at the parents and he would say, look, you guys, if you make me make a decision for you today, someday you will be making your child make the decision who's coming to their wedding. And it was amazing. 90% of the time, they would say, you know what, give us another minute to talk. And they would go out and they would settle. And I think that even if the court is more boxed than spherical generally, if the court takes the time to ask these questions and put it into people's brains in another way, I really do feel like progress can be made, because you're not going to court until you've burned all the other bridges. But I don't know, I kind of lost my train of thought.
That's a fantastic reality check that he has. Oh, that one hits you in the soul. That's a great. And I helped develop the probate elder mediation program in Iowa. We started with a pilot program, but our probate, and we did it in Polk County, for a lot of P's, and which is where Des Moines, the capital, is, because we had a probate judge, and he was great. And he was because he said these families need this, because they're not legal issues a lot of times. It's family issues. And when you can take care of the people and you take care of the families, then the legal stuff becomes very practical questions to answer when you're looking at the elder side. But you're not going to Thanksgiving if you sue your sister. Because you get people, instead of parents fighting over kids, it's kids fighting over parents. And I had a 10-hour mediation once over an estate. Everyone was in separate rooms. I had 5 separate rooms. By the end of the day, I had everybody together, and they're planning reunions and sending me with questions to the lawyers. So we got the family back together. But it's because someone had said, I want to talk about mom's estate. Dad was the one who died, and he had dementia, and it changed his personality, was ugly. I want to talk about mom's. And everyone was like, oh, she wants to dictate. I said, so tell me about that. She goes, I just don't want to go through this again. I just want to make sure we don't have to. Okay, that's different. So we took her over to mom, and she said, oh, she expressed that. And mom was like, oh, your father screwed everything up. I'm not going to do that. And it broke the ice. But because they were talking through lawyers, these people hadn't seen each other for 2 years. Because lawyers were saying, well, they want to discuss. And instead of saying, let's help this family heal so they don't go through this when mom dies. Those are 2 very different things. So I helped them find that other way to communicate. But it can, there's definitely potential there. And the collaborative is spreading into, we have Collab Fest Midwest on Friday. And one of the things they're talking about is how it's being used in estates and trusts, and kind of the elder is tough because of how other states do it, just how the guardian ad litem and the guardianship. But I think that's a way to do it. So it's spreading, and it's going to be a consumer response, because when the consumer starts saying, oh, because that system doesn't feel good to anybody except the lawyers who are getting paid big bucks. If they say, oh, I have another option, that's when the legal system is going to change, because they'll go, oh, someone else is getting my money. And it'll be an economic response.
I have to say that I haven't given up, as you can tell, by being at a law school and trying to bring this into law school, to speed that up by changing the way we educate lawyers and what we end up educating them about, not just, we done it. Yeah, I love that you call it the Quinnipiac playpen. And I love that, and I'm proud of it. And I'm not saying we have it all figured out. Aubrey knows we do not. but we are really trying. And so, for example, you were talking about getting the lawyers out of the way when you're doing family mediation. Yes, and lawyers are often the problem, but I haven't given up on creating the trainings and the shifts for the people who haven't yet made the shift to integrative law, to collaborative law, to help people who are not thinking about this to realize what it would mean to be an effective advocate for their client, which again doesn't mean just being one-sided. It really means, I just worked on a chapter and I was having this tension with my co-author who was talking about collaborative and was sort of saying only lawyers who are collaboratively trained can understand what it's like where the family, the system is your client. And I said, well, that may be where we are now, but people who represent clients who go through mediation have to learn that. And so I haven't given up. And I've taught the course a few times before. If I taught it again, I would absolutely use spherical thinking as part of the way. So I'm just saying, I don't disagree at all. The more we get to the public and have them looking for something different, that is all good. And at the same time, I think we have to stick in there in legal education.
Oh, yeah.
Through ADR courses, because you're right, some ADR courses are still taught very traditionally. And keep changing our language, our approach, the way we're describing. I mean, I'm even thinking of using how I would use your concepts on spherical thinking for students to understand their own journey through law school, right? Because just like the story you told about your ex's boss, I think some students think they need to park what's going on in their life and just do law school. And sadly, some professors still say that, right? That was then, grant an extension for this, but, and there's so much opportunity when we're talking about well-being and trauma, which we talked about like five hours ago. We did a program on trauma, but even just the well-being piece in law, this imagery, don't you think, Aubrey, having been a law student where we were trying to get it right when we're talking about well-being, it's not that we don't have to do the work. It's that you got to look at all your spheres, and there are times you just have to pay attention to the dented part and put the other one aside, and then you'll be able to do the work. I don't know exactly how I would use it, and I would love to know, Kristen, how you think you would use it, helping law students just be healthy and whole themselves before they talk about how they're going to work with clients about being healthy and whole.
Right, because they've got to know themselves. And there is tremendous potential. I've noticed the difference when I do the guardianship mediations. Those attorneys are great because they're not litigators. So they've usually worked with the family. They've trained, a lot of times they've done the estate planning and all. They don't want everything to blow up with this family. They've known them forever. And it's funny, those attorneys will oftentimes say, hey, can we just put the family with you in a room and we'll go sit in your office and we'll just, they're very helpful. And they do know how to do that. We here, at least in Iowa, family law often will get the wannabe litigators because that's the fastest way, because it takes forever to get into court. So that's the fastest way. The collaborative attorneys, and there are a lot of attorneys, they're good family law attorneys, and that will say, let's look at a different way to do this. How do we do the best for your family? But it's tough when you have court hanging over your head.
I was just going to say, Carrie, that so much of what you were talking about, Kristen, felt like, what I remember of law school. Things are like, it's analytical thinking. It's not how you feel. Can you check it off? What's the precedent? What's the slippery slope? We got to control that slippery slope, with the box. And I don't know how you combine, although I'm sure that's what you're doing, Carrie, all the time in your teaching, but you combine this ability to be creative with the ability to be analytical, and not I remember, I was suddenly remembering when I applied to law school, my essay was, an analysis of a book about art. And I'm glad I did it, but I definitely feel like I had to shut that down in law school and wait for my highlight of the week to take my one dance class. And I do think it's really important that be interwoven, that you can be both of those, analytical and creative. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir, but had to make it.
Yeah, it's just some students come in upset when we talk about that because they said, well, I came here to be analytical, and others are thrilled, but then say, I don't quite believe you that you mean it, that you want me to be a whole person. But I have to say, our dean really has branded us, because she believes that she is a dispute resolution person first, that we are helping our students be the whole lawyer so they can work with the whole client. And so when I say we're branding it, I don't mean that in a manipulative, nasty way. I mean that we are sort of staking claim that is what we're trying to do. At the same time, I wouldn't say everybody's on board with that. They go, you do that. I'm just still going to do my little boxed area. And they don't think about, I'm imagining talking to my faculty at a faculty meeting about, and when you do your own little thing and you do it in such a way that you're pulling on the sphere, you're not thinking about the impact elsewhere, right? So I just think that's where I was saying, I see application for this everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I believe it would be really cool to introduce this idea of systems thinking, the interconnectedness, how freeing that is, how this is the generator of creativity and wholeness, to a 1L from the very beginning, that this is the way for you to stay healthy, the way for you to be a problem solver, the way a creative problem solver, a healer. All of those are things that not just our law school, lots of people are talking about in law school. And it's just sort of an interesting thought about at what point do we introduce these new ideas. I like to think if we do it early enough, then people don't have to either quit the law or do something for 20 years. I do know some collaborative family lawyers who said, well, go be a litigator for 20 years, then you'll be ready to be a collaborative lawyer. I say, why do you say it like that? They say, well, that's what happened to me. And I say, well, that isn't the way we need to do it. What if people's professional identity, as when it was formed as a lawyer from the beginning, they thought, I am a healer. I am a agent of change. It is my part of my job description, but much more than that. It is my identity, and that we started attracting people instead of chasing them away. So that we would look at the essay from the artist about the art and going, that's exactly who we want. Because that is who we want. We want people who think, quote, outside the box and spherically.
We have this discussion in the collaborative community of whether or not people just out of law school can go right into collaborative. And I say yes, because that's how you're going to innovate faster, because they're going to always have new ideas. And there's this other mentality that I think is goofy, that you have to learn the wrong way, the old way first, to understand how bad it is, so you'll really appreciate collaborative. And my analogy is, you don't tell a medical student, we have these lasers and these non-invasive things and all of these, but to really appreciate, here's this hacksaw. I just think it's the goofiest thing.
I love that analogy. I love that
Why
analogy.
do we do that to learn? Why do we not let them be innovative from the start? It's like hazing. I just think it's weird.
And therefore, with your Hexel, you need to kill a few people
Yeah.
before you can learn how to save their life.
And then you'll
Oh my
really
God,
appreciate how much better this non-invasive stuff is.
But,
I
you
can
know,
appreciate from the start.
So I started law school in 1980, and it was at the phase where they said you may not use the computers. You must learn the books, because after all, who knows if this computer thing is going to stick, right? Or whatever. They forbid us.
It's a fad.
And then they let us do it. At least we're beyond that. But now we're saying that with Chat GPT and every other potential tool that could revolutionize. We're saying we're going to forbid you from using it because you must learn the old way first. But that analogy is so great, Kristen. I love it. I love it. So, yeah, we're preaching to the choir, but, you know, sometimes we need to get together and sing together to remember just how beautiful our song is.
Yes.
So that we can go sing to others. And we have been recording this the whole time. So there are other people who are going to listen to this and listen to our conversation.